hosts that work in a cluster, as the name says, in order for you to have enough power to support the data. So manage that there is a server that the customer needs to prepare, that they will go and install the Dynatrace software on it. So anything that has to do with one agent is exactly the same. So they just go and install the agents on the servers. There is also an active gate to be deployed. That's also possible. There is also the web UI that we talked before. And then there are two new components that I'll be talking a little bit more in the next screens. Okay, so we have the cluster. That, of course, again, I will repeat myself, but the customer owns it, so they can add more nodes to the cluster to scale it as they need it. Okay, while on SaaS, they don't need to worry about this because this is managed by Dynatrace. Here, if they will maybe introducing another 100 applications, they need to accommodate that that storage, that processing power, and so on. So they need to scale the cluster on their own. In terms of ports, nothing changes. So again, it's 443 for communication with the server and 9999 for the active gates. The web UI still uses 443. There is also something new, which is this cluster management console. And because the idea is that now Dynatrace is not the one responsible to manage the environment, or manage the server. There will be someone in the customer that is responsible to be the admin of the server. Again, taking care that in terms of sizing, everything is good. Making sure that certificates are in place, that connections with Active Directors are in place, that creates the environments for the Dynatrace inside the cluster. So this cluster management console, it's just another interface that is available also through the same port for the customers to administrate the cluster. Okay, so we call it CMC, while with the web UI is where we do configuration at the environment level. Okay, so you can think of a Dynatrace cluster, okay, which is supported by many servers working in a cluster. Okay, so these are all individual servers. And inside this cluster, there are multiple Dynatrace environments. Some are bigger, some are smaller. So maybe this one is for prod. It's a big environment. Maybe this one is just for test. It's a small environment. And maybe I have, an environment for, I don't know, a specific data center one. So I can create multiple environments inside the cluster. And I do that through the CMC, through the cluster management console. Okay, so if I show you, let me see if I can show you. This is our environments. So this is our CMC where we'll be running our labs. Okay, and you see that we have all these environments created for us, 195 at the moment. And I can go and create specific storage retention for each one of those environments. I can create multiple users. I can change, settings like, backup settings, connection to the internet, all that stuff. I can do it because now I am the Dynatrace admin for this environment. And this is the CMC. You can see it by the URL. It has CMC in that. Okay, so CMC is how you actually configure the cluster administrator. The web UI is where you configure whatever you do inside each environment. One agent configuration, dashboards, alerts, all that stuff. Mission control. There was someone answering, so I'll just go through that. So mission control is an optional component, while it's recommended for customers to use this. So this is nothing more than a connection between the Dynatrace cluster, which is running on customer premise, right? So this is the customer premise. It's a connection between the cluster with Dynatrace through internet. Okay. And why we have this mission control? Multiple things. But you can think, for instance, as a way to receive updates, new versions, or a way to get remote support. So while this is optional, it's really recommended for customers to have it, because it will help them manage the managed environment. The mission control team, it's a mission that can also be proactive and can let you know if there is something in the cluster that is not working as expected. But for the team to do that, they need to have this connection enabled, which is nothing more than a connection to the internet. You can have a proxy in the middle, so it's really secure. It's always started from the cluster, so that's it. But that's an important component that it's also part of the managed environment. And when we are going to do a POC at the customer or an implementation, we always need to talk about it, because it's something that is recommended for the customer to have. So there is a question, is the communication to mission control only outbound or both ways? So the answer is, it's always started from the cluster out. So it's outbound. Then, of course, when the communication is established, it goes both ways, because that's how communication works. But yeah, it's outbound only. So it's always started from the cluster out. So by that explanation, it's impossible for someone to start a connection from the outside. The cluster will simply block this. Okay, in terms of storage and retention. So it works in the same way as for SaaS, but now, because the customer has access to the infrastructure and they can increase it, with more storage or whatever, there is more flexibility. So you will notice, for instance, that data that is stored on disk, now you can store it up to 1 year, or even more to 1 year. It's actually confusing, but it's 365 days. So if data is stored on disk, customer just needs to add more disk to it, and they will be able to store the waterfall analysis, which is really, really granular, for more than 1 year. Data that is stored on Elastic, while it can be expanded for some things like user action data, is really not for others, like logs and so on. And this is just because, and the reason behind we are blocking here even for managed, is because if you need more than 35 days, customers need to pay for Elastic Professional or something like that. So it's a different type of license for Elastic, and we are not paying that for the customers. So that's why this is blocked for 35 days. So, but the the customer can decide that they just want 10 days on Elastic. And for Cassandra is also the same thing. So it's also the same intervals. So long story short, Cassandra is the same intervals that we talked before. For Elastic, it's the same, but it can be less. It's not a static value. And for data stored in disk, they can go up to 365 days. Okay. In terms of updates, so remember with what we talked about. Before going there, I see some questions on Q&A. So Anand is asking, okay, why do we limit Elastic to 35 days? So what's the reason? So I'll explain again. So Elastic is a product, an open source product, right? That everyone can use it for free. But there is actually for advanced organization and enterprises, the Elastic Enterprise. I'm not sure about if the name is like this one, but it's an advanced version of Elastic that allow us to do things like consolidation, of having Elastic running on multiple nodes and having consolidation of nodes, or other things that are that. So Dynatrace is not using this enterprise Elastic because it's very expensive and the value is not really that much. So by that reason, even for managed, we are blocking this at the maximum of 35 days, because we believe that's the maximum that Elastic can take in terms of storage. Anything more than that, you start getting, slowness, and you need to add more license to this and more infrastructure. So by that reason, we are also limited to 35 days on managed. And in the end, that's the reason why we moved to Grail, because we are not really happy with the long time storage of Elastic. Another question I see on Q&A for Faisal is, what's the retention period for transaction storage? Is maximum 365 days. Okay. Because in that case, it's just transaction storage is stored on disk. So it's the customer decision to use this. So Anand is asking, so if I have enterprise-wide log management Elastics, can I use these instead of using Dynatrace? That's a good question. I'm not sure if I know the answer. I think no. I think that's not possible, but that's probably something that we should ask support if we can do that. But I will be surprised if that's an option to use your enterprise version of it. Okay. That's the storage and retention. So let's move to updates on managed. So remember on SaaS, there was 2 weeks updates. So in managed, we have 4 weeks. So every 4 weeks, there is a new version of Dynatrace managed. So the customer needs to deploy that version. So it's mandatory to deploy it. So if the customer is on, if the customer is on version 200, okay, and there is already available version 220, customer will need to install all the versions between this and this, okay? So actually on managed versions are, so I think it's pair, so only are like this. So he needs to install all these versions before he goes and installs 2020, okay? So that's why we say it's mandatory. So customer can decide, okay, I don't want to update now, but if they wait for a long time, then they will need to go step by step, which is really, really tedious, and we want to avoid it. So recommendation: have manage in an auto update mode, or every week you choose, okay, you want to install that specific maintenance window of the week and install it. Don't keep the versions piling, because then you will spend a lot of time updating it. Okay, so that's the reason why we call it mandatory. Okay, because they can still wait for 3 months maximum. It will still be supported, or 4 months with premium. So it's not mandatory. They don't need to deploy it immediately. They can wait a couple of months, but it's mandatory because they need to do it one by one. The one agent version, it's also 4 weeks. So actually we ship together the cluster and the one agent. And like on SaaS, it's optional. So they can skip versions. And also the supported time frame is also the same as on SaaS. So long story short, one agent is the same for the 2 deployment models. Sorry, my mouse is very active. And for the server, we have 2 weeks in SaaS, 4 weeks in managed. And also the time frames are only applicable, of course, to the cluster, because on SaaS it is just updated automatically. All right, that's the update schedule. How do you install manage? It's really, really easy. So when you get the license, you get an email. The email will have the link to the requirements. You can also find this online very easily. So if I go and look for Dynatrace managed requirements, I just want to find the requirements here. Yeah, you get here some examples. So how many hosts I will having, how many user actions, and that will be telling me what's the minimum node specifications. So with these requirements in place, the customer can go and download the install script from this link. Then verify if the actually script is secure, and then install it. And when you install it, you add the license to it. So the license is like this license key, and that's it. So this is just what you need. So the installation is really straightforward. It takes probably 20 minutes, half an hour maximum. It will install everything: Elastic, Cassandra. It will also install an Nginx on the front end. It will also install everything that has to do with communication and security and so on into the cluster. So everything is taken care for you. It's really, really straightforward. The only thing you need to be secure is that you have the requirements, because if you don't have the requirements, it will not install. And that you also have connection to the internet, because at this point in time, the license will be validated, and that's mandatory to have it. Okay, so that's Dynatrace managed, really, really easy. So talking about mission control with a little bit more detail that I've just talked before. So we talked about that this is a way for the Dynatrace server on the customer premise to reach the Dynatrace team that is working, in the cloud. So if customers allow this connection to happen, they can receive updates from Dynatrace. So how does it work? Just for you to be aware in terms of the process. So the Dynatrace mission control team makes an update available. So every 4 weeks, there will be a new update. The Dynatrace cluster is running in Japan, for instance, on a data center, and is every 5 minutes or every minute is doing a heartbeat, checking, okay, is there an update? Is there an update? So when it finds the update, it just downloads that updates, okay, through the same communication tunnel that it was established by that connection. So then the cluster has the update. Customer can decide, okay, I will update it immediately, or I will set a timer for it. So maybe on a schedule time, I will run the update and my Dynatrace server gets updated to the next version. Of course, if I only have one node on my cluster, then this will, if the restart is mandatory, which probably in most of the updates it is, you will have a 1 minute downtime. If you have multiple nodes, then this will be done node by node, so there will be no downtime. All right, so if you have a cluster with multiple nodes and everything is up to date, everything will be fine. The other thing that you can use the mission control tool is for remote management. So this is sometimes a scary thing for customers, but is really, really secure. So how does it work? So Dynatrace mission control team is a small team. Okay, there are probably 10 people as part of that team. So that team is the only team that can help you and connect to the server. So how does it work? Let's imagine that the team needs to do something on your node. They will request for access, and that request will be accepted by the Dynatrace managed admin at the customer. So this is a way to work. There is also a way to automatically allow access. That's a decision for the customer to have. So in that way, if the access is allowed, then there is a WebSocket that is started from the Dynatrace server to the mission control. And these guys need to connect through Dynatrace VPN to the mission control, and then they will be able to have access to the cluster. And when I say access to the cluster is to look at, maybe some configuration on the back end on the server. Maybe the Elasticsearch is having some issues, or maybe Cassandra is not writing as it should, or the front end component is not working. So all this kind of stuff, Dynatrace mission control team can help the Dynatrace admin team in the customer to do their job, because some things are really specific to Dynatrace and it's not possible for this team to do it so easily as for the mission control team. So remote management is possible, but the customer is always in control. And of course, most of the times it starts with a support ticket that goes to the support, okay? And then there is some exchange about it. And then mission control team will say, okay, maybe we need to access it, your server, to check, and the customer accepts it, and this happens. So this is not something that we are doing this. So it's not everyone in Dynatrace that has this capability. But again, only when the customer has mission control access, this is possible. Otherwise, it's not. Okay, so this access allows, of course, cluster management, but also things like configuration of the environment. It's also possible to have it. And also there is an internal debug UI that these guys can access. All right, so what other data is mission control getting? So a part of what I just told you. So it's also being used for usage and billing. So it's also, if you're, maybe on a model that it's subscription model, then mission control is something that you have to use, because otherwise, how can we control the license? It's also sending the system configuration, so the size of the hosts, the memory, and so on, so we can be sure that you're not using another provision environment. It's also used for event tracking, so things like someone restarted one cluster or a node, or someone accessed the node and did these changes. So all these things can also be tracked. Health statistics also be sent to mission control. Things like you have a garbage collection happening on the server, or the CPU is saturated on this specific node. So all this data is also being sent to mission control. And of course, software updates, it's not being sent, but it's being downloaded from mission control. So saying that, you can already understand that having a mission control, it's many times a source of discussion with customers, and it is. But in 99.9, if we explain exactly how this works, how people can access it, and what's actually being exchanged, customers are happy to have it, because it's a really helpful tool for them. This team can save hours of downtime if they have access to mission control. So by that reason, it's recommended, and we are always trying to enforce this to customers. Does anyone? So the one thing that will happen if the customer doesn't have mission connection to mission control, it's the license. Okay, the license will be blocked. But to be more precise, so the customer has a license, let's say, make it simple. They have they can deploy 10 hosts. Okay, so that's their license only. If they have access to mission control, they can use more than the 10 host units, because then we will be able to control it. And maybe if they use 12, then we'll be able to send them, okay, you use more than 12, so you need to pay for these two. So if they don't have connection to mission control, of course, this is not possible, and they will be limited to the 10 host units, and they cannot use more than 10 host units. So if the customer decides, okay, I don't want to have mission control, okay, please disconnect it, but be aware that you will be losing this possibility. And all the rest, of course, but this one in particular can be impacting. Okay. Okay, thank you, Alberto. So I was looking at the questions and answers. So Pragati asking about the difference between Elastic and Cassandra. Francisco kindly answered. But in terms of Dynatrace, there are different data sets. So on Cassandra, we stored metrics, time series. On Elastic, we store this type of unstructured data, okay? Like user sessions, logs, and so on. So that's the reason we have both. Okay, monitoring environments. So I already talked a little bit about this. but just to make sure everyone understands. So in Dynatrace, we have this concept of environments, which sometimes, at least I tend to use more tenant just to make it more understandable, but it's the same thing. So monitoring environment tenant is the same thing. So this is where the data exists, okay? It's the monitoring environment where data exists, where my application observability data or monitoring data is, okay? So it's where the one agent sends the data. So when the one agent is capturing the data, it will send data to one single tenant, one single environment. You cannot have a one agent sending to two environments at the same time. So data that exists on that environment is encapsulated. You know, it's not accessible to other environments. So data just exists there. I'm losing the word, but so it's contained. It's data. The data is contained on that environment. So I can use, for instance, this concept. Okay, I have one environment just for production servers and applications, and I have another environment for staging, and another environment for development. So everything is separated. I don't have, you know, data from these different environments together. It's segregated. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, so in the Dynatrace managed, I can create these environments on my own, on my cluster. Okay, in Dynatrace SaaS, if I want to do this, I need to ask Dynatrace, please create me another environment, and Dynatrace will create a new environment, and then you can start using it. Okay, so we do in SaaS. Is Dynatrace that creates the environments for us or the tenants. In managed, because we have this big cluster, we can create our own environments. So this is one idea for segregating environments, you know, by staging. You can also do this by location. So I have my data centers in Americas in one environment, the ones in EMEA in another, and maybe my R&D teams are running on this global environment. Okay, so again, completely segregated. I can define permissions for users that only access this environment and don't access the others, and so on. So data is, in this case, segmented by geography or data residency. But I can do this also for customer. So it can be, customer A, customer B, customer C. If I'm a service provider, I can also segregate data, and in this way avoid that customer A has access data from customer B. Or it can be, for instance, different departments on an organization. Maybe I have my, my sales department, and then I have my back-end operation department or my marketing department, and they use different applications, and I create different environments where those applications will be running. Okay, so this concept is important because in our case, we are using a managed environment in our labs. We created this environment for us, and each one of us have a different one. Okay, let me talk now about ActiveGates. Remember what I said before? An ActiveGate. Okay, maybe I'll do ActiveGates after the lunch break, actually, because we are on time for it. Okay? Oral, you agree?
Perfect, yes, I agree.
Okay, so let's do our 30-minute break now. And then we start with ActiveGates after it. Okay.
Perfect.
Hope everyone likes the idea. So let me just again start the timer. for you. So now we have 30 minutes. Okay, so see you. 35. Okay, let's do 30 and then I'll give it some time after it. So I know sometimes having lunch, so I'll do it 35. Feeling good today. Okay, so all set. So see you in 35 minutes for the active gates.
ยังครับ สั่งไป
hello, boys and girls and friends and partners. Nice to see you again after lunch. Everyone energized?
Yes.
Hello, Coral.
Hello.
So I hope everyone had some coffee, tea, lunch, if that was the case, or some fresh air. Because now we are speeding up a little bit with the active gates. And then after the active gates, we have our first quiz, which we will assess you if you're taking attention to what we have shared in the morning. So I see 25 green check marks. Please let me know if everyone is back from lunch. All right. Okay, so as I said, next topic is active gate. A little bit of a reminder. So what we did in the morning, I would say. So we talked about the different deployment models. Really important to understand the difference, but where more on the company strategy on Dynatrace, what we will be looking for the future. We talked about the updates and the difference between the updates on SaaS and managed. We talked about things like support levels, so the premium and the normal ones that has impact on the months we support. We talked about environments and tenants and how this can be a good way to segregate and segment the data. We talked about the mission control, which is a component that only exists in what? Mission control, manage. Thank you, Ismail. So it's a component that you can use or the customers can use to get remote help from the support. You can also use to download the different updates, but it can also report back in terms of licensing, usage, and events that might be happening on the cluster itself. What more? We talked a little bit about Grail and why it's an important change in Dynatrace, but we also talked about the classic storage retention periods, which they are similar in SaaS and managed. The difference is that in managed, you can expand the transaction storage, the part of the disk. We talked about ports, and we talked about a little bit about active gates. And now we are going deeper on it. So if you remember what I mentioned about an active gate is that it was a kind of I use the word collector. Some people call it proxy, some people call it relay, but it's in essence a component of Dynatrace that sits between the agents and the Dynatrace servers or environments, if you want to abstract it a little bit, and it can bring the data from the one agents to the servers through it. Okay, so the main reason that an active gate is used is because of these three reasons that you see on the screen. First, because customer wants to reduce the firewall changes. Instead of having 200 agents talking with a server in AWS, they can just allow firewall changes to the local active gate, and then they only have one active gate sending data to the AWS. So that active gate is typically installed closer to the agents because that's when it makes sense. I will not install the active gate closer to my server if I want to compress traffic or reduce the firewall changes. So firewall changes and compressed traffic, it's two main reasons. There is another one, big one, which is remember I talked about how can we bring data into Dynatrace when we don't have the one agents, and I talked about extensions that you can use for load balancers, for cloud service, and so on. So most of those extensions, they run on an ActiveGate. So having an ActiveGate available makes it very easy for us also to bring data in other ways besides the one agent. So we can configure the ActiveGate on top of receiving data from the one agents to also get some data from an AWS subscription or from an IBM data power appliance or from a Cisco network device and connect agentless to those endpoints and grab data into Dynatrace. And the ActiveGate is used in most of the things. There are some things that you don't need to use the ActiveGate in terms of integrations, but most of the times it is mandatory. That's why we say, although we have some customers that don't use ActiveGates, very few of them, most of them will use it because, as long as the environment starts growing or they want to explore other ways of bringing data into Dynatrace, then the ActiveGate makes sense. Another great, fantastic stuff is that because the agents have in their configuration all the endpoints that they can use, when they get a new ActiveGate installed, so let's imagine, let me go back a little bit. So in a normal situation, what you will do, you'll have the server, your environment. You will install the ActiveGates, and then you start deploying the agents. And the agents, when you deploy them, they already know that there is an ActiveGate that they can use through. So they will go through that ActiveGate. After some days, you decide, okay, instead of one ActiveGate, I want to use two because I want to have some kind of failover. So I'll just go and deploy another ActiveGate. So the agents will automatically learn from the other ActiveGate that there is a new ActiveGate, and they will start balancing their traffic. So some agents will go to one ActiveGate, some other agents will go to another ActiveGate. If one of the ActiveGates fails, then the agents, because they have the list of the available endpoints, they will go all to the other ActiveGate. If that ActiveGate, by somehow dies or is unavailable, so the agents don't have any other solution than to go directly to the server. So the agents will also try to go directly to the server. So the way that this component communication works in Dynatrace is really flexible because the components are always learning from the others, and they will adapt dependent on what is available or not. Yeah, and I see a very interesting question from me, and I know Coral is answering, but I can answer it live. So how does the first one agent knows about the ActiveGate? Because when you download the one agent, it already has that information embedded. Okay, you download the agent from the environment. So you download it, and it knows the environment endpoint and any ActiveGate that exists. So when you start one agent, you will already know where to go back. So if you install the one agent before the ActiveGate, then when you install a new ActiveGate, the server will have that information and pass it to the one agent. And then one agent will learn this from the server, and if it makes sense, it will jump to the ActiveGate. Okay. Yeah, so that's why we say don't need to, kind of pointing agents to one or the other and so on. So that's not something you need to worry too much, because Dynatrace and the one agents and the ActiveGates, they kind of know from the others, and everything is handled automatically. Okay, Francisco, question on the chat. I will let that pass. But what can we have ActiveGate run like a balancers? I'm so probably talking about load balancers. So in fact, ActiveGates are not load balancing in the right way of true, because you have the one agent only connecting to one ActiveGate at a time. The one agent is not sending one packet to one ActiveGate, another packet to another. So all the time, the agent is connected to only one ActiveGate. So if that ActiveGate fails, then you will jump to the other. So that will be a failover environment. If you want to have true load balancing, and some customers have this, you need to get a load balancer in front of the ActiveGates. So the agents will connect to one point only, and then the load balancer will be giving the load and divide the load through the ActiveGates. But yeah, so when people ask, is the ActiveGate doing load balancing? In some sense, yes, because the agents will automatically divide themselves among the available ActiveGates. But if you want to be very specific, is not, a packet loads kind of balancing. We are doing agent load balancing, I guess. Yeah, and you can also use proxy servers in between the agents and ActiveGates and servers, so you can also configure. Okay, as I said, I think that was probably one of my first sentence. ActiveGates are technically optional because one agent can connect directly to Dynatrace. So ActiveGates are optional, but 99.9% of the customers will use it, because not only they have a lot of agents and it makes sense, but because they start using extensions, and to use extensions, they will have to use ActiveGates. Yeah, I talked about this, that firewalls, of course, make it very easy, because in that way, you just have, local communication between the agents and the ActiveGate, and then you just have one point to get through. I'm not sure if this is coming after, but the ActiveGate, you can deploy it on a Linux box, on a Windows box, or on Kubernetes as a container. So that's different ways of having the ActiveGate. Not recommended to have the ActiveGate and one agent running on the same server. So this should be kind of a dedicated server, or if it is a container, of course, it's dedicated, but it's not something that you want to maybe install on an application server or something like that. It should be a dedicated machine for that. So these are some examples of architecture. So just to make sure everyone understands, this is the Dynatrace server here. There are 2 ActiveGates in 2 different network zones, and the agents are monitoring the application. So the application is a normal front-end, middle database application. Each server has the agents, and on the front end, it's running on this network zone, DMZ. We go through this ActiveGate. These 2 will go through this ActiveGate. Nothing really special. We talked about the ports. Again, if you're talking directly to the server 443, if there is an ActiveGate, then the ActiveGate is listening on port 999. Okay, yeah, I think there are other things I would like to say here, but I don't want to go very deep at this point in time. So there are actually different types of ActiveGates. So I've been talking about ActiveGate, but there are actually two big types. One that exists on both deployment models is the environment ActiveGate. So as the name says, this ActiveGate is only working for a specific environment. Okay? So I have agents. So these are my agents. This is for environment A. Okay, these are all agents for environment A, and there is an agent for environment B. So these agents will send data to this ActiveGate, and it will not accept agents from environment B. So I'll need to have another ActiveGate here, which is an environment ActiveGate for B, and then I'll use these ones. Okay, as expected, environment ActiveGates only can receive agents from one single environment. And these two, they exist on SaaS and on Manage. There is also something called the cluster ActiveGate. So the big difference is that the cluster ActiveGate, it can get data from agents from multiple environments. Okay, so it will be able to get environment A and environment B. And it doesn't exist on SaaS. Okay, so it only exists on Dynatrace Manage. On SaaS, if the customer has 3 different environments, one for prod, one for test, one for dev, you will have to have 3 environment ActiveGates for it, one for each one. No other way. Well, to be 100% clear, there is the possibility to kind of change the configuration of the environment ActiveGate for multiple, but let's not go this way. Environment ActiveGate, as the name says, is one ActiveGate, one environment. The cluster, on the other hand, you can just deploy a cluster and it will be grabbing information from all the agents, independent of the environment. So more details, an environment ActiveGate is bound to a specific environment and so handles traffic from one agent instance that belong to that same monitoring environment. An environment ActiveGate can handle traffic from one agent only, so it will not get any data from other ActiveGates. To install an environment ActiveGate, you need to download the installer from the environment itself. Okay, so in our, where is my, so this is the demo environment. If I go here, if I go to my environment and say deploy ActiveGate, I can download the environment ActiveGate from inside the environment. I'm inside my environment where I have all the data, everything. So when I download this ActiveGate that runs on those different platforms, it is already contains embedded the endpoint of the Dynatrace server, so it knows exactly where to send the data back. Okay. As I said, it's supporting Windows, Linux, and the Kubernetes flavors, so the main one and OpenShift. To get the download, you go to deploy Dynatrace, install ActiveGate, as I did. Okay, so you download it from the environment. The cluster ActiveGate is different. You download it from the CMC. So in order to get to it, I'm not anymore on my environment. I'm on the CMC, which is the management of the cluster. And then I go here and find here cluster ActiveGate. So I'm downloading this from the cluster side. So this ActiveGate will have embedded the cluster endpoint, and it will be able to get data from multiple environments, not just only one. Okay, so Dynatrace Managed Cluster handle traffic from one agents that belong to any environment on the cluster, of course. So it's not environments from other customer or whatever. It's, of course, environments from the cluster that we are managing. Another thing really interesting is that I can have cluster ActiveGates receiving traffic from environment ActiveGates. So let's imagine that I have here a lot of agents, maybe 200 agents deployed in one data center, and I have an environment ActiveGate here, and maybe the customer has another data center somewhere else where they also have a lot of agents. So they can also have an ActiveGate here. So I deploy this cluster ActiveGate as, maybe on a privileged network zone. So these ActiveGates can actually send data to my cluster ActiveGate as again, as a proxy or a collector, and then the cluster ActiveGate will send data to my cluster. So these allow us for, in terms from the architectural standpoint, different options that depends what we are talking. Maybe this is, EMEA data center, and this one might be USA. So they all belong to the same customer. Everyone is happy. It's just I'm kind of trying to isolate the traffic, and then I can use a cluster ActiveGate to this one. So depending if you want to use it or not, it really depends from it. Just to know that by default, these ActiveGates, which are the environment, by default, they will go directly to the cluster. Okay, so that's the default way of them to work. So they will only go to the cluster ActiveGate if you configure them to go. Otherwise, they will not. They will act as a cluster ActiveGate doesn't exist. Okay, so let's go here in a little bit more schematic. So let's imagine that I have a Dynatrace SaaS account. Okay, I'm a customer. And as a customer, I have an account. And in that account, I have 3 environments. Okay, for now, let's call these environments green, blue, and red. So I'm not sure what's going on inside each one of those. But I'm managing these 3 environments. As I said before, I will need one ActiveGate for each environment. So when I have agents that I want to send to the red environment, they will not be using the green or the blue. They, of course, will go to the red. Environment ActiveGates, that's the way they work. Now, let's imagine. So, of course, this should be all in the customer premise. Okay, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put the ActiveGate, close to the AWS zone or something like that. This needs to be closer to the agents. Okay, so now let's go to manage. So we have a cluster with 3 nodes. We created 3 environments on top of it. Again, we can have the same structure that we had for SaaS. We have environment ActiveGates, 1 per environment. By the way, I can have as many ActiveGates I want per environment. Okay, here I just have 1 per environment. But now I have deployed a cluster ActiveGate. Why? What will be the reason for me to deploy a cluster ActiveGate? Maybe this part of the environment is actually on a different data center. Okay, And in this data center, I have just, maybe here I have 100 agents, here I have 150, here I have, I don't know, 200, and here I just have 3. Okay, and I don't have any communication for it. So in that sense, because I only have 3, maybe it's a good option to install an active gate that can take data from the 3 of them and just deliver it. So that will be a use case to use an active gate. Maybe because this part of the environment, I don't have enough agents to oblige to have one environment active gate for each. But the other thing I can do is actually think, okay, if I have this structure, why instead of having all these environment active gates sending data, why don't I change here and actually point those environment active gates also to the cluster active gate? And in that way, I can support this infrastructure and I can support this infrastructure on my own. And then I only have one endpoint here to care about communicating to somewhere else. And of course, here the example is that the Dynatrace managed server is running on a partner or another location, and the customer has their own data center. Makes sense? Now we have this concept of hierarchy in active gates. I'm not sure if maybe this is a little bit confusing, but you just need to think like this. You have one agent, okay? And then we have the level 1, which is the environment active gates. So the agent will always go to the environment active gate by default. Then you can have a cluster active gate, which is like a second level. Cluster active gate. Okay? This cluster active gate, if this active gate is down, maybe the one agent will go to that cluster active gate. Okay? They might decide to go there as a second level. And then we have the server itself, okay? The Dynatrace server, which in reality, it has something called, so inside, called the embedded active gate. So there is actually an active gate, but this is like the level 3. So the one agent will only go there if there is no other alternative. Okay, so that's the idea, but it's basically kind of a hierarchy for the one agent to work. For the active gates, it's not the same thing. As I mentioned before, environment active gate will always by default go to the server. I can also configure to go to the cluster, but that's not something that happens out of the box. As you say here, environment active gates by default connect directly to the cluster. There is also this concept of network zones that we'll be talking, I think is tomorrow, that allow us to kind of group active gates, because you can also need to think, okay, for a small environment, this is easy, but if I have 50,000 agents or more, and 100 active gates, and 20 cluster active gates. So when I get to environments with this size, and we do have some, then we need to have some kind of organization just to tell, okay, you only go to these environment active gates, you only go to these cluster active gates, and then we create this concept of network zones. But we'll be talking about this, I think it's tomorrow. Okay, there is a question on Q&A, which is about the embedded active gates, which is a typical one. We always get this question when we get to embedded, because where did this active gate come from? Okay, just to make it very simple, this is an active gate that exists inside the server, the cluster. Okay, so it's not supposed even for us to know that it exists. It's just a point. But in reality, it's just an active gate. So you can use it for other stuff. So for instance, you can use it to integrate with AWS. You don't need an active gate to install, to connect to the AWS. And sometimes it makes sense because maybe I have an AWS environment with 20 agents, and my Dynatrace environment is also on AWS. So do I really need an active gate? Yeah, maybe I don't need it. But then I want to monitor some AWS service, like some database or something like that, and I want to run some extensions. So then I need an active gate. Well, no, you can use the embedded active gate for AWS service. So, but I don't want to create over complexity on this. You need to think the embedded active gate as just an active gate that exists on the server that is there, and it can get traffic from agents, and it can also run some extensions. Not all the extensions, but some. Yeah, and on manage, we also have the embedded active gate. So it exists on both servers. Okay, an active gate. You already know. You can use it to aggregate one agent data, to compress the traffic, to reduce the firewall changes, to run extensions, but you can also use the active gate for other things. You can run integrations. So I was talking about one, integrating with AWS and Azure and VMware vCenter and Kubernetes APIs. So you can also use an active gate to fetch data from these platforms. You can also use an active gate to run synthetic tests. For the ones that don't know what the heck synthetic tests mean, I will explain down the line, but imagine like a robot exercising an application every 5 minutes, checking like a ping test. So we can run these tests from active gates. You can also use the active gates to run memory dumps. So if the application has a problem, the one agent can capture the memory dump of that server for analysis. These memory dumps will be stored in the one agent, but the best practice is to push memory dumps to the active gate to avoid overloading the agent. Of course, you can run extensions. I talked about this. Also, receive real user monitor beacons. That one is a tricky one. Let me see if I can find one good slide here. Yeah, I think this slide is good. So remember this picture I've showed you before? So we have agents on the web server, on the application server, and on the database. And we have active gates for each one. Now, one thing that this agent can do is very magic. That this agent, it can automatically put a small JavaScript in every page of this web server. So when a user at home, is using the web and goes to this application, he gets the web browser, okay, with the JavaScript, extra JavaScript, okay, that the agent put there. And this is magic. Why? Because just with this JavaScript, we know exactly where the user clicks, how much time it takes in the interactions, if there are any errors, if there are any issues with the third party that is connecting, because we are running on the browser of the user. How magic is that? So just this agent, it does this, what we call JavaScript injection, and allows for the user to be tracked from the browser. So no matter if he's running on different versions of browsers in different countries. Okay, so this is great, but one question then arrives. Okay, so we are collecting data here. How can this data go to the Dynatrace server? Okay, and we will go in more detail about this. But long story short, it can go directly, which is great, because if this is all available and accessible and Dynatrace SaaS is on the internet, this can just be sent directly. But some other times, maybe this is on a secured location, or this is on a secure location, you don't know, you can use an active gate. So we use an active gate that can get what we call beacons, which is nothing more than the data that we capture from the JavaScript injection to the Dynatrace server. Okay, so this is why we say it's the receive real user monitoring beacons. That's exactly what it means. Aman is asking, it needs to be cluster active gate in this case. It can also be, let me check. Yeah, it needs to be an active gate. It needs to be a cluster active gate. Apparently, yes. The environment active gate doesn't support this beacon forwarding. So that also tells you that this is something that is used only on manage, because the Dynatrace server is maybe on a secure connection. Okay, but I'm hesitating because the beacon story, you can send even beacons through WAN agents. So in the end, everything is possible. It's just what is the default way of working. Also, another capability of the active gate is the mainframe monitoring. So there is one specific active gate for monitoring mainframes, okay? So for now, that's what you need to know. Actually, I can show you when you go to the deploy active gate and you select the active gate version. So Linux, you can choose, okay, what's the purpose of this active gate? I will use it to route WAN agent traffic, monitor cloud environments, integrations, or run extensions. So this is the default one, and you will use this for most of it. But if you want to run a synthetic monitoring, you will have a dedicated active gate for it. If you want to monitor mainframe, you also have a dedicated active gate for it. Okay, so you need to pick what is the type. If you go to the cluster active gate, then the only option is route traffic and run synthetic monitors. Okay, so there you will notice that you don't have extensions from cluster active gates. You don't have mainframe from cluster active gates. So they only do these two parts.
Hi, Rodrigo. Sorry to interrupt, but there is like repeated questions about the beacons. If you can explain the beacons a little more, the ROM beacons.
So we will talk about this on the agent, on the real user monitoring, but it's just what we use to carry the data that we capture on the browser to Dynatrace. So we are capturing the clicks and the response time on the browser and all that. And then this data that is captured needs to go to the Dynatrace server for analysis, right? So it goes through a mechanism, which is a request that we call beacons. So those requests, they have different ways of flowing through until they reach the Dynatrace server. One of the ways to to make those requests reach the Dynatrace server is through an ActiveGate. Okay, and I will stop here because we'll discuss this a little bit in a bit more detail. Just need to know that the ActiveGate can receive these beacons, which is the data that we captured from real user browser monitoring and mobile. All right, so a kind of a recap here. When do I need an ActiveGate? When? Well, if I want to limit the number of firewall changes, definitely. If I want to do some kind of load balancing, and again I will put load balancing like this, it's agent balancing or a large deployment, sure. If I want to lower the network bandwidth by compressing and bundling the agent traffic. So this is the typical reduction that we get, 30%. If I want to monitor virtualization, this is VMware environments. So for VMware, we need to have an ActiveGate to integrate with the VMware system. If I want to use synthetic, agentless RAM, mobile RAM, also I use an ActiveGate for that, and the extensions. So here is a table, because for some corner functionality, you cannot use some ActiveGates. For example, for synthetic monitors, you cannot use an environment ActiveGate. Is this correct? I don't think it's correct. You can use an environment ActiveGate for it. So this is
I think, yes, it's correct, yeah.
Okay, but for RAM, is the cluster ActiveGate, as far as I've seen. And this one for in the bottom, it's okay. So mainframe and ActiveGate extensions are only available on environment ActiveGate. Let me just actually correct that on the slides. Okay, so let's, before we go to the quiz, a little bit of a refresher, and then we'll do a quiz. Okay, so you see here these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they are next to a Dynatrace component. So what you need to tell me is, to on one line, okay, I'm just looking at what's going on. So here, this one. Do you want to unmute yourself?
I think, yeah, they meant that this one.
Okay. Sunil, do you want to say something here? Okay. Can you raise your hand so I can unmute you?
And Rodrigo, by the way, about the external synthetic monitoring data, it's for synthetic monitors that are on other tools. So in that case, we can only use like the cluster ActiveGate or the embedded ActiveGate.
Okay, I understand it. So meaning integrating data from other tools.
Exactly. So we would need to integrate it using the API, and in this case, we need the cluster ActiveGate or the embedded ActiveGate. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this should be a little bit more clear, even though. Okay, sorry, Sunil, I don't see you. You want to say something? Feel free to unmute.
Yes. Yeah, this slide I'm talking about. Next slide, please. Where we go? Next one, please. I want to know other capabilities. Right.
So just 1 second, because I'm really
Yeah,
very
activate capabilities. Activate capabilities.
Additional capabilities. I don't see that. Where?
So just explained about the additional capabilities of ActiveGate.
Which one? All of them?
Yes, just on the ActiveGate, additional capabilities of the ActiveGate. So I think the previous slide. Next slide, please. Next.
Previous
yes,
one.
This
one.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, this one.
Yes.
Okay, so
Thank you.
You can use the ActiveGate to integrate with other platforms. You know, if you have AWS service that you want to bring the metrics or logs into Dynatrace, you can use an ActiveGate for it. You can run synthetic tests from an ActiveGate running, dedicated to it, and it can do like this idea of, it's a little bit more than ping tests, but just checking if the application is available. You can do this test from the ActiveGate. So in that sense, it will be a synthetic only ActiveGate. You can use it to store every time there is a from the application, and this data can be pushed into an ActiveGate and stored there for further analysis. You can run extensions. I did like 20 times already. The beacons, I already mentioned these 2 times, but we'll be talking about what exactly this is. But you can send beacons to the ActiveGate or through an ActiveGate also, and the mainframe monitor. Did I answer your question? Okay. I think I need to fix my speakers because I'm hearing it very, very low. Also UCoral, so I'm not sure, probably something on my side. Okay, so let me just go to these ones. Kind of a refresher before the quiz. So we get these numbers here, okay? And we get these letters. So I want you to put on the chat something like 1D, 4B, 3A, and 2, oh, I don't know, C.
Yes.
But on one line, just put me on the chat the connection between the component and the letter there. So Aman was the first one, C to B, A 4D. Thank you so much. Well, I'm checking here my sound.
For us, Rodrigo, your voice is clear.
Yes, but your voice is a little bit low, but I can still understand it. But Sunil was really, really low. I'm not sure if it is something on Zoom or on my. Let me check all these settings. Can you talk now?
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Way better. Okay, yeah, it was Zoom version. Changes. Okay, so I see 1C, 2B, 3A, 4D as the most. Choose one, and it's actually correct. So 1 is the cluster. 2 is the cluster active gate. And how do I know it's a cluster active gate? Because it's getting connections from another active gate. Okay, and the only active gates that can get connections from another active gates are the cluster ones. And of course, 3, it's environment active gates, because those are the only active gates that can talk with the other active gates. And then I had 1 agents calling their active gates, and number 4, okay, I see some wrong answers there. So 1, this is 1C, 2B, 3A, and 4D. So 4 is mission control. So it's like the cluster active gate just sending data somewhere in the cloud where the mission control is living. Okay. So that was a very easy one. But if you fail this one, I'm a little bit scary of your result in the quiz. So this one is a little bit more complex. So again, the same thing, numbers and letters on one line. Please put it on the chat. So Amen, we'll have a quiz, and this quiz is for 15 minutes. If you want to take that time also to do a quick break to the restroom, you can go. Finish the quiz quick. All right, so where are my answers? 1D, 2C, 3A, 4A. Okay, I see different ones. 1D, 2A, 3A, 4A. Okay, I see a lot of wrong answers, honestly. But some right also. So, okay, so number 1. So number 1 should be very easy, I think. So 1 is here, here, and here. So it's the 1 agent's communication with active gates. So what did we learn? That the 1 agents will, when talking with an active gate, will use port 999. Okay, so it's 1D. So every time you see an active gate, an agent talking with an active gate, it will be port 999, because that's the port that the active gates are listening. And it doesn't matter if it is an environment or on a cluster, it's always the only port that the active gates are listening to. So 1D. Now I see 1D is probably the one that most of people said it right, which is good. So let's go to number 2. Number 2 is a tricky one. Oops, too fast. Number 2 is also D. Again, the same reason. It's an environment active gate. by being in an environment active gate, is only listening on port 9999. Okay, so it's not using any other port to get traffic. So 1D, 2D, 3 is A. Why? Well, because that's the actual HTTPS port that we use to configure Dynatrace and configuring the cluster. It's port 443 HTTPS, normal one. And the last one, oops, my slides were trying to move faster, is number 4, is also A. It's also using 443. Umsa, you have a question? Comment?
Yeah, sorry, I unmuted myself. My keyboard's just frozen for some reason, so I can't type anything. So I'm going to drop off and switch the laptop off and on.
Okay, all right.
No.
All right, so this is the exercise, 1D, 2D, 3A, 4A. Good. Again, it's really easy. If you think about it, it's 443 for cluster, and for active gates is 999, listening ports. So it makes it very easy, the work of the network admins. Now, let's do a quiz. Okay, before I share the quiz link, I want to say that this is mandatory for everyone attending this bootcamp to do the quiz. So even if you think, okay, I don't know nothing or whatever, just try it. Because if you fail to do this, you'll fail also to get the voucher at the end of the bootcamp. That's the first thing. The second thing is about your email. So you should use, it's the first question of the quiz is, what's your email? So you need to use the email that you use on this bootcamp, the partner email from the organization that you work for. So if you use your personal email, or maybe if you use a colleague email, it will not work. Okay, you need to use your own email. Be sure you don't do any typos, and make sure that you actually add your email correctly, because you will receive by mail the result of your quiz. Okay, so we'll be doing a review after 10 minutes, but then you will also get the result on your email, and it's being sent to the email that you put on the first question. So if you put a typo there, first you will not get the results, and also it will not be accounted for the voucher. So I want to make sure that everyone understands this, that this is a mandatory step of this bootcamp, and that you will get the results by email. So you need to use your partner email without any typos. So with that, this is the quiz link. I'm also putting it on the chat. I'll give you 10 minutes to do this. I'll just add the timer to avoid you to get lost on the time. So here is the quiz and the timer. At the end of the timer, I will do the review of it. For the ones that finished, don't forget about the green check mark. So let's see. I got 100 responses. Let's do the actual review together. Move here, the report. Okay. So first question, well, actually second, because the first was your name. Hope that everyone got the name correctly. So let's see, number 2, a one agent is, most of you said a piece of software that sends telemetry data, which is absolutely correct. So all the others are just wrong answers. Number 3, Dynatrace cannot be run on premise. Obviously, I don't know about these 5% of you. Where have you been? So of course, Dynatrace can run on premise. We call it managed. Metrics on Dynatrace are saved for a maximum of, so here I see some hesitation, but most of you said 5 years. Answer. So remember, Cassandra on the Classic, it's stored for 5 years with the granularity of 1 day. Okay, here we don't have the question if it is on Grail or not. So we kind of have to assume is not, because it doesn't say anything. If it had the option 10 years, I will be confused. It has the option no limit, which in reality, there is a limit on Grail. So that's also not the correct one. So 5 years is the maximum for metrics in Dynatrace. When looking at CPU utilization of a particular 18 days ago, what will be the resolution that I will get by default? So 18 days. If you remember, and I don't want to go now and find the slide, but there was the first 14 days, right? Anything below 14 days, I get 1 minute. Everything below 28 days, I get 5 minutes. Everything below 400 days, I get 1 hour. Everything below 5 years, I get 1 day. Okay? So if I have 18 days, it means that I'm more than 14 days, so this one is gone, and I'm on the 5-minute interval. So most of you said it right, 52 of you. 5 minutes will be the resolution that I'll have, the highest. Of course, I can also have 1 hour because the data gets aggregated, but 5 minutes, it will be the highest resolution for me. Number 6, changes to configuration in Dynatrace are applied retroactively to older data, which gets reanalyzed. So this one, we just put it here as a checkpoint because we didn't talk about this, but just so you know that if you are experienced with Dynatrace or not, because the answer is false. Okay, so any changes that you do in Dynatrace, they don't get retroactively applied to the data. So, for instance, if I let me give you an example. If I create a metric based on other 2 metrics, it doesn't go back in time. It only starts being captured from that point on. And all the other configurations is like this. 7, Dynatrace SaaS uses mission control. 78% said false, and this is correct. So Dynatrace SaaS doesn't have mission control. This is only for managed. So, but what is mission control used for? And here we get 1, 2, 3, 4 answers correct. So this is a multiple choice one. So we don't really tell you how much are true. And that's exactly how it looks in the exam. So in the exam, you also have the same thing. Sometimes you get asked, select all that apply, and you don't know if it is 1, if it is 2, if it is 3, if they are all. You also need to know that you are penalized on those questions for the wrong answers. Okay, but we'll talk about this later on. So what is mission control used for? Remote support, correct. License utilization, correct. Cluster health monitoring, also correct. And billing for Dynatrace Manage, correct. So these 4 are the ones that are correct. So all the others, either because they talk about things that doesn't have nothing to do with mission control, like compress one agent traffic, or because they talked about Dynatrace SaaS, which doesn't apply here, are wrong. 1 agent's updates are mandatory. 1. But 59% of you said false, which is correct. Okay? So as I mentioned, mandatory, it means that you need to apply that update. So in one agent, we can skip updates. We don't really need to do those updates. I can go from version 200 to 220 and skip all the versions in between. So the updates are actually not mandatory. I can skip those. So for the ones waiting for the result, it's normal. So sometimes when a lot of people do it at the same time, kind of gets a buffer in a way, and it gets delayed by 5 minutes. So need to wait, 10 15 minutes. If it's more than 30 minutes, then probably you have a typo on your email or something like that. One agent updates are mandatory. The answer is false. Number 10, one agent versions are supported for. And here, well, a staggering 91% of you said it right. 9 months on the standard support and 12 months on the premium. Good job. 11, Dynatrace managed cluster updates are mandatory. True or false? They are. You have to apply the updates one after the other, okay? You can wait for 3 months. After 3 months, you'll be unsupported. But when you start updating, you need to apply all the updates that you missed, one by one. Number 12, Dynatrace managed updates are triggered when? So here we only have three answers correct. So we're talking about Dynatrace managed, because if it was SaaS, it will be triggered. What will be the answer if it was SaaS? Dynatrace updates are triggered automatically, automatically for SaaS. So on manage, that's not the case. You can also do that, but that's not the case. So you can either set a time of the week, like Monday, 3 o'clock, and do that. You can also just execute it using the upgrade now. There is a button that is there and you can just click it. Or you can actually trigger this through an API. So there is a REST API that you can use to trigger an update. So these three are the correct ones. So if I go to my cluster, let me see if I can show you that. It's actually on settings. So right now is not set for deploying. Okay, if I do this, I can just select one day to do it. Okay, and the third one, it will show here a big button saying upgrade now when there is one new upgrade available to do it. So that will be one way. Another way will be to use the API. And we can go to the cluster API, and here we want to go to the management. Oh, where are you? Is this the one still? Okay, I don't know. Updates, manage updates. Okay, so here you can go trigger an update using this specific call. Okay, so maybe you want to do this as part of your, management process in the customer, and the customer decide, okay, I want to do this when there is a new release scheduled, and I want to test it on test, and then moving to production, and I can automate all that. You should know that you also can do it through an API call. How can new environments be created for Dynatrace Manage? Here we have two options. First one is through the web UI. Okay, as expected. The cluster management console, the CMC, you can create environments based on it. And there is also an API call that you can also use it. So again, somewhere here. I think that's on V2, that one. So these are just different API versions. Yeah, you can create new environments using this call. Okay, with the name of the environment, or you can just go to the environment list and just add a new environment there, like this. Okay, and you can create as many as you want. I'm not sure if there is any limit. I don't think so. You can create as many environments you want. All right, so coming back to the quiz. 14, where can users and groups be managed in Dynatrace managed? Where can users and groups be managed in Dynatrace managed? Well, it's on the CMC. So Dynatrace managed anything that has to do with user not privilege, but user credentials and permissions to access environments. It's all done through the cluster management console. 15, an ActiveGate is a required component. Required. And the answer is false, because as you learn, it's an optional component, even if most of the customers use it. Select the different types of ActiveGates. Here, only two, environment and cluster. Okay, so they are the only two correct answers. What's the name of the other ActiveGate we talked briefly? Anyone can put on the chat? Embedded, 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 yes. I'm not expecting you get questions from embedded in the exam, but it's always good to know. Number 17, deploying ActiveGates will increase, decrease, or have no impact on network bandwidth. Of course, the answer is decrease. And 77% said it right. ActiveGates can be used to. I'm sure you get this type of question in the exam, so make sure you understand it very well. So they will ask you a couple of options, and you have to choose which ones are correct. Definitely, ActiveGates will help customers to simplify their network port management, their firewall management, because by the simple nature that you have less endpoints to care about. So that's one. The other one is to run extensions. So ActiveGates are used a lot by our customers to run extensions, getting data without the one agent. Definitely, it's something that can also help to lower the network footprint of the agents, because the ActiveGate compresses, aggregates that traffic, and allows to save how much? How much can we save in terms of network overhead with the ActiveGate? 30%. Thank you. Yeah, so that's what's our test we have, or that we've been made, that 30% is how much we can decrease in network overhead. Next one, pull data from other platforms. So in other words, it allows Dynatrace to integrate with other platforms through the ActiveGate. AWS, Azure, Kubernetes API, VMware vCenter. What more? You can also use this to
Prometheus, for example.
Prometheus, yeah, exactly, or OpenTelemetry also, right? Also
Oracle also for some databases.
For database monitoring, exactly. So these we don't call it extensions, but in the end they are just extensions, which are kind of out of the box one that we can use to integrate platforms. So the ActiveGate can also be used for that. And the last one on the list here is monitoring mainframes. So which is ActiveGate, that type that we use to monitor mainframes? Environment. Exactly. So environment active gate is the one we use for monitor mainframes. Yes, Sarah asking about Oracle. Okay, Coral answer. So Oracle is just an extension that we can use to monitor the database remotely. Just pulling some data from some tables from Oracle. We also have the same thing for Microsoft and Mongo and others. Probably most of them. 19. Environment ActiveGate and Cluster ActiveGate installers are respectively downloaded from 50 of you said correct. Environment ActiveGate from the environment and the Cluster ActiveGate from the Cluster Management Console. Good. 20. An environment ActiveGate is by default bound to a single environment, true or false? Most of you said it true, which is correct. And cluster active gates cannot accept connections from environment active gates, true or false? It's false. So this is possible, and it's not a default situation, but you can actually use it in this way. So that's it. That was the first quiz. So as you saw it, I gave 10 minutes for 21 questions, or 20, because the first one is your name. So it gives you 30 seconds per answer. And we did it pretty well. Most of you finished on time with good results. So in the exam, you will also find it a little bit stressful, but once you get comfortable with the nomenclature and the type of questions, it should be very easy. For ones still waiting for the result, well, you need to, I'll ask you to wait 10, 20 minutes more. And if you don't get it, try it again, maybe on, after the session today, and see if you get it. If you don't get it, just drop me an email and we can check what's going on. Okay, so who wants a quick break now, or should we continue? Let me clear.
Do a quick break.
Yeah, let's break for 10 minutes. Just remember that we only have 1 hour left for today, but it should be fine for us to go and install the agent. Okay. All right, so let me do a 10-minute break here. Okay. Okay, so we are back from the break, almost at the end of the session. Okay, so I want every one of you to go to the URL on the screen, but it's also on the chat, and find your environment. So if you're getting trouble getting your environment, make sure that you are using an incognito window. Probably that will fix most of the issues. If even there you don't have an environment, it's because you are not registered for this bootcamp, I would say. But feel free to drop me a message and I'll check. So I'll give 2 minutes for everyone to join, for the ones that didn't yet. Please put your green check mark when you can access the environment. And I will check for the others.
Please use the green check mark on your reactions button, because I saw some people putting on a message in the chat. Only use like the green check things.
All right, so I see most of you are able to connect. So I see some questions about RAM browser extension and so on. So we'll have time to discuss all that. So don't try to go faster. We will do step by step. So let's now go to a little bit of information on the environment. So as I mentioned, you need to go to the lookup URL. You find your credentials. Okay, find the link, because in my case I'm on an admin, so it doesn't ask me. But I can open this in an incognito window just to make sure. So then you get the username. You get the password. See if I can make this to work. Okay, so you'll land on your own environment. You see your name on the top. So that's expected to see your email that you use for joining. And here it's your own environment. So each one of us have a dedicated environment with only our data. So things that you should know. There is this menu here that you click and it opens. It has a lot of menu items. So one of the things I like to do when I start using is kind of favorite the ones that I'll be using a lot, like Smartscape, maybe front end here, and definitely I should get settings, because I'll be using settings a lot under managed. Get to settings. Yeah. So you can favorite the ones you want and close the menu to get some real estate. What more? So there is on the dashboard link screen some default dashboards, but one of them is called Associate Certification Bootcamp. If you don't land on this screen, you can open the menu again and find the dashboards under the favorites, or it will be under Observer and Explorer. Okay, if you click there, you will land on this screen, or you can go to this icon on the top that will also give you the same view. So then you go and find the Associate Certification Bootcamp. So this is our planning screen for this bootcamp. You have here some of the instructions that we already shared to you. But the important part is, of course, besides my picture and Coral, is this section here. Okay? Starting from the bottom, bootcamp slides. They are available here. You can click. You will have access to those slides. Just put your email and to get access to it. Make sure that you bookmark this link. Okay, bookmark it, because you can have access to those slides even after the bootcamp ends, even after the environment goes. So that's the idea, that you keep this link and you can revisit from time to time, maybe 2 weeks from now, maybe 2 months from now. Why don't we allow you to download? Because these slides are always having changes. You saw some of the changes that I added today. So in order to have them always up to date, we just provide you the link and you can check it online. So bootcamp slides, this is the link that you should bookmark before you continue. These other tools is the Dynatrace in demo environment. We'll not be using that anymore. So the portal that you can use to find also resources, and if you are not registered yet, which I'll find strange, you can do it through this way. So the important part here, bootcamp slides, definitely. Here, the lab environment. Again, from the bottom, we have 2 applications that we are going to monitor. Actually, we will focus more on the Easy Travel Angular, but we also have another one called Easy Travel Legacy. So if you click there on the link, it should open the application. Okay, Angular or legacy. So they look different because they are actually different front ends, but they share the same back end. It's just two different front ends. Xavier, do you have a question?
Yes, could you please help us in navigating back to this page again? Many of us are struggling how to reach here.
Okay, sorry. So you land, so you have your dashboard, you have your environment already, right? You're already on your environment? Okay, so now you need to open the menu and find dashboards. Okay, in alternative, you can click this icon here on the top. It also works. Okay, if it is the first time you click it. If it is the second time, you'll go to your last dashboard. So open menu, find dashboards. Then here, you will find one that has no icon. It's called Associate Certification Bootcamp. You click there and you should land on your bootcamp dashboard. Okay, here you have the slides. Here you have the applications. So the applications, we have the full domain. So if I click, you will see the domain of the app. So different one. In alternative, we also have what we call the instance, the EC2 instance domain. So, but only use this one if the other one doesn't work. Okay, so these are the applications which are currently already running. So each one of us have a different application or different instance of the application, and we will be monitoring those applications in the next days, okay? In order to access the server where the application is deployed, we need to connect using SSH. To make life easy for everyone, we are using something called Web Shell that allows you to use a web browser to talk with the instance through SSH. So really important here. Really important here. Always make sure you open this on incognito window. So I'm already in incognito, so it doesn't let me. But it might not be your situation, but for some partners, we found out that unless you do it on incognito, it will be almost impossible to connect because it will be very slow. So use incognito. It makes your life easier and also our life, because then everyone can join and we can continue. So really important. Web Shell, open it in incognito window. So you click there. When you click, you will see a message on the top. Very important also. This message, it's the browser asking if you should use clipboard. You should allow, because then you can copy and paste text through it. Okay, so make sure you choose allow. If by mistake you selected block, you have an icon next to the address that looks like a clipboard. You can click there and change your option. Okay, this is the same for all browsers. So here I'm using Chrome, which is of course the one which, you know, from our experience, it's the one that works better, but it's the same thing for other browsers. But if you have Chrome, I will recommend also you to use it. Saljas, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Actually, the bootcamp slides are not getting loaded for me. So everyone having the same issue, or it's probably a local issue from my side?
Well, it's a quite big slide deck. It takes at least some megs, so it definitely takes a while. But you know, just to keep trying, and you'll get access to it. Okay, let me see if it's working, just to check. but it should be, so it's 71 slides. It just takes a while to go. And of course, if many of us are doing it at the same time, it will take. So I'll let it run for some minutes. It should be showing up. Yeah. Okay, so we are almost ready. So we have the web shell connected. So here we are inside our instance. Okay, so if I do any command here, I can interact with the instance. And I'm also having my environment ready. My applications are live. I can click there and I can see that they are running. So I'm ready to start. Okay, so please, if you did so, green check marks if you can do. If you are at this point in time that you have the dashboard, that you have the web shell, that you have the applications running.
Rodrigo, we have one person that when he's entering the lookout URL, it's saying that there is no environment for them.
Okay, so can that person or you send me by message, the email?
Yeah, so I'm going to send it to you.
I already talked with someone which was complaining about the same thing, but it's not.
You know, they told me that they faced an issue with receiving the Zoom link and then also to enter.
I'm sorry, I already told Vishal that he actually got the meeting from someone else, the Zoom meeting. So
okay.
Okay, let me give you. Let me check 1 minute
Mm-hmm.
For Vishal. So just to make sure that I'm not being unfair.
Also, everyone, just a reminder: if you can connect to the dashboard, the web shell, and the VM, use the green check mark in the reactions buttons. Please, thanks.
All right, so let's continue here. I'm sorry for this break, but trying to fix for everyone. But it's really an automated process. So if you registered for this bootcamp, you got an automated email that contains all the details. So you don't need to get the Zoom links for anyone else beside us. And if you didn't get the confirmation email from us, it's because you're not registered to this bootcamp. And it's unfortunately, that's how it works. But anyway, we're trying to fix for everyone. So let's continue. I hope everyone can connect to the web shell using the incognito window methods recommended. And let's move on to our first lab. And I want to do this before we end today. So we have an application that we want to monitor. So this application is called Easy Travel. It's an application that the customer has. The customer is the Easy Travel Corporation. They are online agents for booking travels and holidays. So they work with end users, but they also work with other agencies to provide special offers and special holidays in their website. So we had a discussion with them, and they told us that the application that they want to have Dynatrace be deployed against, it's a Java application that has some components on C++, that also has a database, which is a Java Derby, and some web servers on the front end. Okay, so they are actually migrating from the old interface to the new one. Okay, so they already did the migration. So all the users right now are actually accessing already the Angular interface. So that's what is expected from their standpoint. But they still have the other one available, maybe for a user that didn't migrate it yet. So our role is to go and deploy Dynatrace to monitor these two applications. Okay, we want to provide to this customer the visibility that they don't have at the moment. So for the ones that are interested in getting Easy Travel app, it's available on this link here. You can download it and install it on your own instance. Maybe you want to do this, after the bootcamp at a later time, just for fun and making your own environment. Feel free to do it. All the instructions are there, and if you have any trouble, let us know. So how does it work right now in terms of our environment? So we have a Dynatrace managed server, right? It's actually here already. So we have a managed cluster, and each one of us have an environment. So this is mine, this is Coral environment, this is, Jack, this is Deepak, whatever. So each one of us have a different environment. They are all segregated, okay? And all of us have also an application, Easy Travel application deployed in one instance. So this will be mine, this will be Coral, and so on. What we'll be doing now, we'll be installing the agent on our applications, okay? And then the agents will report the data to our specific environments, right? In order to access it, that's what I explained before, we can use our web shell to connect using this jump server. And we can also access the applications automatically, the two front ends. This is us. We are here with our dashboards. Everything is fine. The cluster is connected to the mission control. Everything is working perfectly. All the instances are running on AWS. And that's it. So I already explained most of it. So this is the dashboards. Let's go to the labs. Very important. We'll be having close to 16 or 17 labs. Some of them are a do, some of them are watch. So the do, we are expecting you to complete those labs on your own, okay? So you do it, and it's accounted for the voucher, okay? There are other labs which are only watch. So it means that you don't need to do these labs. Maybe it's optional, so you can decide to do it and follow up with us. but we'll do it in a more quick way. It's just for you to watch how it's done, okay? And they are not accounted for vouchers. So only these labs are the ones that are mandatory, the others are not. So let's go to the first one. Is everyone ready? Okay, so very easy. This is a do, okay? So we are expecting you to do this one. Connect to your VM instance using a web shell. Verify that if Easy Travel is running by running this command. Okay, you should see a window like this one, and then you can test your links on the dashboard if you can access it. Okay, so I'll give 2 minutes to this one. Okay, green check marks when you're done. Yeah, the fourth step is, or the third step is just to check if the links are there and it's working fine. Okay, so let me do this on my environment just to make sure if it works. So again, let me close all these windows that I'll do it again. By the way, meanwhile, the slides have just popped up. Okay, web shell. First, how do I get to the dashboard for the one that didn't saw it? Dashboards, and then, okay, and then we need to go to this one, and then we click web shell. Okay, and the next step will be this one, service easy travel status. Service easy travel status. So this is just a way for us to check if the service is running. It is. We see active, running. We see here all the different process that started to support this application and some log message and so on. So you don't need to worry about this for now. Everything looks fine. We also check the two links. If they are responding, everything is working fine. Okay, first lab done. Let's go for the second. So it's about one agent. Okay, just 1 second. So one agent. So the one agent, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned maybe not. So we support multiple operating systems from Linux to Windows to Solaris to mainframe to Kubernetes platforms. So the one agent is probably supporting the most common operating systems that you see out there. Of course, if you are using a very old version of Linux or Windows, it's it's probably not supported anymore. Okay, so of course we try to maintain our support as the same support that we have that the vendor has for the operating system. Communication of the one agent to Dynatrace is outbound only. What that means is if I have the one agent and I have an active gate in the middle and the Dynatrace server, the communication is always starting from the agent. So the agent sends data to the active gate responds, okay, great. How are you? I'm fine, here's my data. The data goes to the active gate. The active gate connects to the Dynatrace. Dynatrace says, okay, how are you? Oh, I'm an active gate, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. Send your data, and then the active gate sends the data. So it always goes from the inside out. The ports you already know, 443 or 9999. You can install the one agent manually just by downloading the agent and deploy it in the server. That's how we will be doing today. But there are automatic ways to do that. You can use group policy for Windows. So in this way, you can deploy it in all the Windows machines on the customer under certain policy. You can also use things like automation tools, Ansible, Chef, Puppet, you name it. So there are already available scripts that you can use to deploy the agent in the servers. So this means, because the installation is so easy, you will see it is just run it. You can have thousands of servers being monitored at the end of the first day. So recently we had a POC where after one day, we were monitoring 18,000 hosts using Terraform in that case. So, but it's really, really straightforward to do this. So the one agent auto update is enabled by default. So this is the default configuration. It means that every time there is a new version of the one agent, you will get it deployed. But of course, as you already know, we can disable that update and decide when we want to install it. And you can do this at a global configuration or per host or per something that is called host group, which is group of hosts, and we will also explain a little bit more about it. There are a couple of installation options that you can decide before we install. So maybe change the name of the host. Instead of having the host name, you can use something more user-friendly. You can create some tags. You can group it, make it part of a group. You can make it part of a network zone. So we will talk about all these things later on. You can also decide if you want to allow, because sometimes some customers will not really do this by default. So you can just deploy the agent, but without log file access. And very important is also the mode that you want this agent to run. So it has multiple levels. So we have infrastructure only, which is basically looking at the name says infrastructure metrics. So for all the hosts and the processes running there. Okay, CPU, memory, network, disks. But you can also capture logs with the infrastructure, and you can also run extensions on infrastructure only. So this is the infrastructure only. You can change it here. There is also the full stack, which I think is still a default mode. So this is where you get, the full magic of Dynatrace, because in this way, the agent will look at the process, look inside the process, and capture the code, It captures CPU utilization by request, how the memory is being filled. It will capture the peer paths or the distributed traces. So it gives you a lot of detail on the application side. Okay, so the full stack monitoring, it's a mode that you want to use when you have applications that you are interested to get deep monitoring. If you have maybe a server that it's an antivirus server, maybe you are not that interested on what's happening inside the application antivirus. Maybe the infrastructure only will be fine. Another example will be databases. So databases, we don't have deep monitoring or database engines because mostly, or they are all written in C native code to be very fast. So, and C is not supported, or C++ is not supported by Dynatrace or any profiler that I know. So for databases, typically we just use infrastructure only. Okay, so this is important because of license. So there is, of course, different costs in here and here. And you want to save some bucks to the customer because sometimes it doesn't make any sense to go full stack. The point here is that you can decide when you are deploying the agent, what will be the mode. Rashikesh, question?
Yes, hi. Actually, I want to ask that in the first lab, we just have to open the shell and type the whatever you service.
Is it travel status?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just we need to type this only.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you.
Which technologies I said it were not supported? Akshay is asking. I was talking about C and C++, which is typically what you find in databases. Okay. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this database monitoring, but don't be scared because Dynatrace can actually capture queries because we do this from the application side. So if I have an application, okay, and I deploy the agent there, and I have a database, the agent seated here will see the queries going to the database and we'll see the response of the database. And it will give us the time and how many rows and all that information because we are monitoring this from the application side. And here, the agent is running in full stack mode. And that's mandatory for you to get that visibility. On the application, we only need infrastructure because we are not getting any details what's going on inside the database. So you install an agent infrastructure to get CPU, metrics, memory, okay? And then table information from it, like understanding what's the volumes of the database. Is there any locks happening? Maybe long-running tasks, execution plans. You can run this from the active gate, but this is what we call agentless monitoring. Okay, we don't have any agent. It's just remote monitoring. So that's how we do it for databases. We will be talking a little bit more afterwards. Yeah, so it's via the JDBC driver or whatever that driver the application is using, we capture the queries. Okay, coming back to the topic here, full stack. So full stack, it's a default, it gives you all this information. I also need to tell you that there is a new mode that is actually, it's below these ones, is the discovery mode. Discovery just gives you, in essence, smartscape topology and basic metrics on the host. Okay, so it's even cheaper than infrastructure only. And you might want to use discovery, in all the other servers that are not critical for the customer. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, sorry, someone on the door. So let's go for another lab activity, okay? And probably you'll now understand about the full stack and everything. So the idea here is that we will go and deploy the agent in our instance, okay? So you want to go to manage deploy Dynatrace, which is a menu in your environment, and then start the installation of a new one agent on a Linux box. So let me just start, so I don't want anyone to be lost. So you are on your dashboard, and now you need to find, manage, and deploy Dynatrace. Here, you should click Start Installation and find the Linux button. Then you should create a token, because this token will be used for the agent then to be downloaded, okay? So it will show here on the command, but now it's not visible, but we can make it visible if you want. So this token, it's only showing this time. You can save it for other times, but you don't need. You can just create another one. Then you can choose the different installer type. We will keep the default and the monitoring mode. So on this environment, we only have full stack and infrastructure because discovery mode is not yet available on managed. But if you go to the demo environment, you see that the other modes. So right now, let's use full stack. Don't need to change nothing here. And then we need to run these 3 commands. You just copy using this button here and paste it in your web shell. Okay? Do the first, do the second. The third one, you need to run with root rights. It means you need to add sudo or append sudo before the command. So you make sure you copy the command and then type sudo and run this command. Very important. Number 5, do not restart your process right now. Okay, so we don't want to do this at this point in time. We'll do it tomorrow. We just want to install the agent and see if we can see the agent showing up here on the deployment status. So I'll give you 5 minutes to this one. Okay, and then I'll do that on our own, and we will do it for the day. Okay, I will clear the green check mark right now. So make sure you put your green check mark when you finish. Okay, verify, good. So if you're unable to paste, try with right click on the with the mouse. Make sure you have clipboard access enabled and use incognito mode. So for the ones asking what is the step, I think it's 3. Let me check. So this 3, verify signature. So that step is optional. It's just to verify if the installer that you just downloaded is actually coming from a reliable source. So basically, you will verify if the certificate is actually from Dynatrace. So it's just a kind of a best practice that you just verify if you are not downloading maybe an attacker agent that you will be installing and break your application, or even worse, and that you are actually downloading it from Dynatrace environment. How will you know if you successfully install it? It will show on the deployment status. So there is a deployment status button, click there, and it will show in a couple of, at least 1 minute, after 1 minute. But you also should see on the web shell a message saying that it was able to contact successfully the environment. To install with root rights, you need to add sudo before the command on step 3, okay? So add the word sudo before your command. Okay, green check marks. Okay, for the ones having issues copying, I will suggest that we, after we finish this exercise, you can stay and we can work on it together. Okay, so we will check what's going on. What are network zones? We'll talk about that network zones tomorrow. Okay. Let me do this on my side, and then I'll stay for helping anyone that cannot really install the agent. Okay, here is my installer. Okay, here is my Ubuntu VM. I'll just move it here. So first thing, I just want to copy the first command to download the installer. Very important. Look on your browser, there is an address and there is this clipboard here. Make sure you are allowing this site to see the clipboard. Because if you don't do that, you will not be able to copy. I usually just copy with right click. It works. Okay? But you can also use Ctrl-Shift-V. Okay? I'm using a Mac, so it should be the same for Windows and V. If this is not working for you, try to use other browser in incognito, because sometimes some extensions, they get in the way. All right, so I'll just drop here the first command, which is to download the installer. Okay, you will notice the command is a double get, then it has the name of the file. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's probably very small, sorry. So you can also start this window, which is Shift Control Command on Mac, and Shift Control Windows on the Windows. Okay, to make it bigger. So the command is double get, the name of the file, the location, or the endpoint. So you see that it's downloading from our Dynatrace server, the installer of Unix, Linux, or a certain architecture. Then we have another that has authorization, which is the API token that we created. Enter, It should download in a couple of seconds. If I do list, I have it here already. Okay. Second step, verify the signature. Just verify if this is actually a file that is coming from a proper source. So I'll just drop the command there. It will take 10 seconds. It was even faster. So verification successful, it means, that the file and the actual certificate that we downloaded from our issuer, it's valid. It means that this package is valid. So the last step is to run the installation. And this one, we need to change it a little bit. We need to add sudo at the beginning, because if I try to install it without root rights, it will give me an error saying, okay, you need root rights. So add sudo, paste the command. The command is just running the script that you downloaded before. The monitoring mode is full stack, and we have access to logs, because that's actually what were our selections here. Enter. So it will check if you have root privilege. That will be the first thing that will do. And then it will take a while just to verify if everything is okay, if you have free space, if you have actually supported operating system and all that. And you will then see a message saying that the agent was connected. So yes, if you already finished your lab, feel free to go. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Okay. You'll also see that we create a specific user for it called DT user. So that will be the user that the agent will use from this point on. So it's not using the root user to run, it's just for the installation. Okay, and at the end, you can see it on the bottom. We are all set. The Dynatrace 1 agent is fully operational. It was able to connect with the Dynatrace cluster. So that's what we need to get. The final step is just to go back to our UI, click deployment status, and see if the agent will take care of those tomorrow. That's how we validate that you actually install the agent. Okay, that's everything for today. Sorry for extra minutes. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. I can stay for longer if anyone has questions or had some issues installing it. Rashikesh.
Hello. Can I have to use this user ID and password for tomorrow's lab also?
Yes. So tomorrow we'll have the same way. The environment will still be running. No, you can use the environment today if you want, but tomorrow, when you return, use the lab lookup, put your email, and you can access it again.
Okay. On the same page, or we have to save this?
Yeah, on the same page.
Okay, sure.
But I'll provide the link first thing in the morning. So if you don't need to store it.
Sure. Thank you.
So Sarah is asking, is the token for the environment separation? No, the token that we created when we do the deployment is just, it's only for to download the agent. So that's how when we are on the instance and we do the wget command to download it, we need to authenticate ourselves. If we don't do that, anyone could download the agents and use them. Okay, so that's what the API token is being used. It's just and only to be able to download the agent to our file. There is other tokens, but they are also embedded in the agent. So you can actually see that if you go to access token. So these were the ones I created. So I get it here. You see the scope is just for download. But there are others that you can use for other things to access the API and so on. And those are created here on this screen. That one is just only for download. The agent itself also has embedded a token. It's not visible for us, but the agent, when it's sending the data, it's also authorized to do that. But that's something that we are not changing. It's just something that is embedded as part of the agent functionality. Aruna, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. So I have a real-time scenario, Pasco. Like in my project, we are just starting an observability implementation project in our project for one of the customers. So here the thing is during the RFP stage, they have mentioned APM and RAM, real user monitoring, or in scope. And all the infra middleware database, those are not in scope. So I just want to understand, as part of APM and RAM, what are the things that will get covered? For example, if we are having a container, what are the things that will come as part of the APM and RAM? I just want to understand from that perspective.
Okay. So you can use the agent for everything. So you can use the agent for infrastructure, for APM, and for RAM. So it's the same agent, it's just different functionalities that you enable or disable. Now, you can decide to disable some parts of it, but others depend on some functionalities. So for instance, if you want to do real user monitoring from the one agent, you need to have APM working. That's mandatory.
Okay.
So that's if you are using the agent. Then there is other ways of doing, for instance, only RAM. In those cases, you can do agentless RAM. That's a technique that we'll talk about tomorrow. You can also have, instead of deploying the full agent, just kind of a pass agent, a process agent that only look at a specific process on a server. So there are different ways, and it really depends what you're looking for. Also, what's the use case? Because I could imagine that probably you are asking because there are other agents already running there, and they don't want to get any conflict, maybe. So we need probably to discuss this a little bit offline, just to understand exactly what's is the use case behind it.
Okay. So here, few things are configured, and the thing what we are trying to do is with Dynatrace, they have done the configuration. We are few matrices are getting monitored. Now we need to perform an assessment and do a gap analysis and see what are the metrics that are missing.
Yeah. So if the customer has the agent deployed and is not seeing some parts, it might be from different reasons, but we need to assess and understand why. Maybe it's not just enabled. Maybe they don't have license for it. Maybe it's a problem that needs support, help. We need to check.
Okay, so by default, if we install an agent in full stack, it will be sending all the matrices.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Got it. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there is no more questions.
Okay, I'm just seeing Alberto having some issues. So you need to run your command with sudo before the last command. So this one, before you run it, just add sudo. Okay, you did it. Because your message said you are using Ubuntu. So make sure you do it. Anyway, I will open a breakout room and feel free to join. Or anyone that is not that they already finished for the day, feel free to leave, and we'll check. I'll check with Alberto what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Aruna, do you have another?
Yeah. So install an agent, like will it be collecting and sharing the distributed traces, logs and metrics and all these details as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, traces also we can see it, is it?
With the one agent, yes. With one agent in full stack mode.